This morning I've been reflecting on Matthew chapter 22. In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus gets asked a series of questions that are challenging his authority. And one of the questions that is asked, it was after the Sadducees had been silenced by Jesus. The Pharisees come and they ask the question, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus' response is something that we're all quite familiar with. As a matter of fact, the Jews would have been very familiar with his response. It was referred to as the Great Shema, which comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind. They would have said this over and over and over and over every day. So Jesus says, verse 37, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and with all of your mind. And then he says this. This is what's weird to me. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Now, I remember the first time I heard that, I'm starting going like, what is like loving the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind? And then even Mark's gospel, with all of your strength. Well, he says this, love your neighbor as yourself. Here's the question that I was wrestling with this morning. Shane, how do you love yourself? Do you love yourself well? Or do you self-lash? Or do you live in a world of shame? Shane, do you look at yourself and see someone worthy of pursuit? Do you look at yourself and see why it is that God left heaven and came to earth for you? I'm a recovering legalist. I grew up, not necessarily my family, but my church setting was pretty legalistic. And as a result, kind of an effect of legalism is that I have a hard time accepting the fact that I am beloved by the Lord. I struggle with not beating myself up more than what the Lord would ask me to. And I'm not talking about being convicted of things I can improve on. I'm talking about always working, always doing, and never feeling enough. It's the reason why I became gravitated towards books by Brennan Manning, which are saturated with grace. It's the reason why I've loved reading books by Brené Brown, who challenges the acceptance of shame. It's the reason why I push towards vulnerability. It's because there's a part of it where I want to get what is accusing me from inside out for everyone else to see. And in some sense, I'm asking the question, does everyone see how broken I am? Or is this something that's just in my head, which is another reason to criticize myself? Here's the question, though, I began asking myself this morning. How am I ever able to love my neighbor if I don't know how to love myself? Like Jesus says, the second command is like the first. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. And he says, and the second is like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't know how to love yourself, Shane, then you're not going to know how to love your neighbor. Now, I'm not talking about this cheap love for ourselves where I'm like, so go out there and, buy yourself a carton of ice cream, or go out there and spend a ton of money on yourself. And I'm going like, truly loving yourself. What does it mean to love yourself? I tell my college students all the time, I'm like, no, every single person needs to go to counseling. I've been to counseling. My wife's been to counseling. We've gone to counseling as couples, as individuals. Everyone does. Why? Because everyone's broken. And all counseling does is this, is it says, let's pull out everything that's broken inside of us and let's put it on display so that we can look at the way in which the grace of God has actually moved in the brokenness of our story. It's almost like we trust the darkness with our story more than we do the light. We would much rather keep our story, hidden away from everyone in the dark recesses of our heart, because we believe that the darkness is able to handle our story to provide for us better than the light himself. No, pull your story into the light. Like, this is the question I really was asking myself that I want to ask you today. What are the things you're doing to love yourself? To truly love yourself? Here's a couple of things that I've done, and I've already alluded to one of them. Go to counseling. If some people usually have all kinds of excuses, like it's too much money. Literally, it's going to be about 50 or 60 bucks a week. And I know that's a lot. But you know what? There's a lot of us that are spending money on more organic food. Why? Because it's better for your body. There's a lot of us that will make sure that we have the right kind of clothes, or that we get our coffee fixes. Listen, you can find 50 or 60 bucks to put into making your soul more healthy. Second thing, obviously, I would tell you to do is to saturate yourself in the Word. Saturate yourself constantly. So even listening to things like this is a way of loving yourself. But it only matters if you allow yourself to be challenged, to be transformed by what it is that we're discussing right here. Another thing I tell you to do is to find safe people to tell everything to. I love the fact that my wife and I live without secrets. We live in a community that holds us accountable. My wife knows the passcode to my computer and to my phone, and why? Because I'm not going to trust the darkness with the things that matter most to me. How do you Sabbath? That's a question of how are you loving yourself. I mean, the Lord makes the Sabbath a part of it. And I'm not saying become a slave to the Sabbath, but what I'm saying is this. If you're working 7 days a week, or if you say things like this, I have to get something done every single day, or otherwise I feel like a loser. My question is, why? Why do you feel like a loser? What is the addiction that we have to work? Listen, even God himself rested on the seventh day. How are you choosing to Sabbath? There are different ways that we know how to love ourselves, and it's not so that you can selfishly serve yourself. It's so that you can prepare yourself to love your neighbor, or the way Jesus says it, not just loving your neighbor, but it's another way of loving the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind, and all of your strength. Here's another thing. If we were created in the image of God, and we abuse ourselves, don't be surprised whenever we're abusing God himself. Because when you come face to face to the image you were created in, and you hate the image that you already see in yourself, you'll actually probably engage God as a threat as well. So here's my challenge. Love yourself well, so that as the church we can love our neighbors. Love you guys. Don't just read the Word. Let's become the Word. Let's be the Word.